These short stories are from my first ever book of writings, entitled Happy Ending, published in Paris in 2023 by Classic Paris. When I was a kid, I was always scared to be sent to the fields. The really bold, snot-nosed boys who got into fights and caused a little too much trouble would have to make their way out to a large mound of dirt up near Dublin Airport and spend the day picking strawberries. One time, when I was being a nuisance, my mother said that she'd send me to them, and I dreaded the thought of being stuck in the mud all day. I was 17 years old when I first got thrown out of the house, and when my younger cousin heard that I'd been sleeping in the park for a few nights, he took pity on me and let me stay on his couch for a month or two. At this stage in my life, like many other teenage boys, I didn't understand the concept of showering, and I smelled so bad that he and his brother would both call me Red Onion Boy. I turned their place into a pigsty, to the point where the entire family stopped using their living room because they couldn't bear the stench. While staying up with my cousin, we'd smoke cheap hash and test out various research chemicals, to mixed success. This was long before shady online marketplaces, and these mysterious powders and potions would have to be acquired from young, pasty, dreadlock-clad hippies who worked in tiny, colourful shops dotted around the city centre. These shops were called head stores, and were very easy to find, until they became a target for real drug dealers, who in the space of a few weeks burnt them all down in a series of coordinated attacks, petrol bombs and balaclavas, just like the old days. Head shops sold a bunch of natural and synthetic drugs that had yet to be banned by the Irish government. They had spice, which made me vomit for hours, truffles, which didn't really work, strange fake weed which I'd sell to posh people at parties claiming it was real, mushrooms, synthetic ecstasy and cocaine, grinders, pipes, stash boxes, stupid multicoloured bongs. We were always in these shops, bartering for some sort of magic bean that would help us escape from our problems for a few hours. Salvia mashed my head up the first time I smoked it, and my friend in school ended up stabbing someone to death with a machete, an hour or so after he did. He was only 17. I was the first person he called after it happened. I distinctly remember dramatically trying to kill myself in my cousin's single bed off the Ballymun Road, after putting way too much mescaline up my ass. 3 times the dose the kid with the dreadlocks recommended us to take. We cursed him as we lay there in silence staring at the ceiling, with our lives collapsing around us, twitching and crying and waiting for the trip to be over. His brother danced around the room with the chicken mask on, to fuck with us even more. We begged him to stop, but he wouldn't. This was just a normal day for us. Teenage life in Dublin was a series of blurry vignettes of degenerate behaviour. Wild and violent acts, sometimes committed out of boredom, and sometimes committed out of necessity. Maybe they should have sent me to the fields to pick strawberries after all, but I probably would have run away and done the same anyway. My only way to make money as a kid was to steal from Urban Outfitters, or other similar stores in Dublin that carried books, art supplies and hipster stuff. I would take a fat stack of graffiti publications in my clammy little hands and briskly walk out the front doors while smiling at the bemused staff, later on selling them to my friends or bringing them to second-hand bookshops nearby. After that, I had enough money to buy spray paint, pills or a McDonald's. We would spend most days at a shop in the city, which acted as an impromptu marketplace for stolen goods and a hangout for graffiti writers of all shapes, sizes and social classes. The shop was governed by a wise, kind owner who would look after the kids and keep them in line, somewhat like Fagin from Oliver Twist. Boys would gather to buy and sell drugs, show each other graffiti pictures, beat each other up, plan parties, get stoned, sketch in each other's black books, and brag about what they stole that day, showing off boxes of silver Reddings or bags of cookies they'd nicked from Marks and Spencer's, where I'm still banned for life. The petty moments of stealing cookies and small pens grew, developed and snowballed, and from that point onwards, myself and my best friend would step our game up and start robbing handbags, cameras and iPods at house parties, and I'd lift people's wallets from their coats in clubs, later going up to Thomas Street to sell what I could to tiny pawn shops like cash converters, using fake IDs. I built quite a reputation for it, and when someone's phone or bag would go missing at a house party, they'd usually lock the doors and keep me there until it was found. I remember the police came to my house, with video footage of me selling stolen cameras and phones. It turned out that the store I mentioned earlier had been under police surveillance, but my mum managed to talk her way out of it, grounding me herself and saving me a criminal record. We were always in the city, trying to come up with scams and causing trouble, and I was a terror. All I cared about back then was finding a couch to sleep on, or someone or something to get high with, so that I wouldn't have to go home and deal with reality, or even worse, my mother. I remember walking around a squat huffing glue until I passed out, and rifling through a 50-year-old woman's underwear drawers, looking for some spare euros to steal, while she was in the bathroom doing coke and telling me about the good old days. It was a wild time, and a lot has changed. Some things for the better, and some for the worse. A lot of the boys I knew from back then are dead now. A lot have lost their minds due to drug addictions, and a lot are totally boring, grey, tired, and normal. Some, even worse, moved to Australia. I feel blessed that I'm not any of these things, just sometimes a little jaded, nostalgic, and melancholic. We all get anchored and tied down, whether it's by our boring jobs or our overbearing families, our tired relationships, traditional belief systems, substance-heavy social lives, or our many unneeded material possessions that glue us to one place. There's many things that can lead us to be stuck in the quicksand of life, unable to move, think freely, or break away, and lead to situations that are sapping our energy and holding us back. After a while, things in life become stale and familiar. Your friends grind and grate on you, and you have visions of your boss's head slowly circling in a microwave, getting hotter and redder until it pops. Splat! Society wants this for you. They want you to be another number on the screen, going to work and eating shitty grey meals and saying yes sir, no sir, tiring yourself out by working for the man until you slowly die in misery, wondering where all the time went. I reached a point in 2019 when I'd had enough. I was fat, miserable, depressed, and totally burnt out. I was becoming the same as everyone else, the same as the people I despised. I was becoming a normal, everyday bore. My ex complained that I never got off the couch, and she was right. I'd become the nightmare that we all fear. Obese, unmotivated, and bored, sitting in front of a blinking TV with dirty underwear on, watching some mind-numbing American brain rot that passed the time between shoveling stodgy fast food in my face. I had nothing to do and nothing to live for. I had no clue who I was or who I wanted to be. London was grinding me down. It was eroding my personality and my passions, and the little rebel inside me was gone, nowhere to be found. Something had to change, and fast. I was lost and on the edge. A short while after my realization, a big breakup hit me, and I had an epiphany, which in all fairness was probably partly due to the large amounts of magic mushrooms I was taking, the strange Scottish man who used to hypnotize me once a week, and all of the spells that my friend who just started practicing occult Buddhism had been performing on me. But an epiphany is an epiphany, and who was I to complain? I started to realize what was important in life, and that was to break the shackles of societal norms that engulf us, to do away with your crap job, your boring friends, and the shit city you live in. To live autonomously, to live hardcore, to live free, to live where and how you want, not defined or put in a box by anyone or anything. The quest was finally realized, and one thing was now clear. The only thing important to me was total freedom, a new life, and a new way of living. It was 2016, and I was working in a warehouse about 10 minutes from Pentonville Prison in North London. The building was old and rat-infested, surrounded by butchers and dingy builders' cafes that hadn't changed since the 70s. I had to step over large puddles of blood from the slaughterhouses opposite to get to our spot in the morning, and once I groggily arrived, inside I spent the day cutting made in China labels off clothing, packing orders, or loading trucks with boxes. I worked with a rat pack of graffiti writers, skateboarders, and drug addicts. We would pack parcels all day while drinking codeine delivered from France and listening to DJ Screw and Sick Boy Rari on the crackly warehouse speakers. The boys skateboarded out front while I smoked rollies and sketched on A4 paper. There was a bench press in the corner and we lifted weights when we could. The managers called us retards. We got paid £75 a day, and they definitely got what they paid for. The customers complained about packages that we'd accidentally dropped nugs of weed into, and most of the staff were high and constantly grouchy. But if you pay with peanuts, you must deal with monkeys. There was a cafe around the corner, run by an Irish lady called Jackie, who'd met her husband in the countryside, converted to Islam, and moved to London. She had a strong Irish country accent and wore a bright red hijab. I'd sit there on lunch break every day with the boys and eat a cheese omelette with black pudding and a tea with 2 sugars and a dash of milk. It was in that warehouse where I met a kind, strange, grey-haired, wizard-like character from New Zealand, whose graffiti name was Spaghetti. I was instantly confused and entranced by this man. He was tall, eccentric, unusual, and looked at everything in life sideways and upside down, instead of straight on. Spag would walk into a store and instead of stealing a couple of things, would leave with trays of shit for everyone. A real Robin Hood type character. With his help and guidance, I remembered what a good shoplifter I was, and how fun it was hanging off overpasses, writing my name at 5 a.m. He showed me how to get food for free, here, there, and everywhere, and he reminded me that there was more to life than going to work every day and sitting in a pub every night. He had a unique perspective, and showed me that illegal things weren't something that you had to grow out of, but something that made this banal existence actually worth living. He taught me about food delivery scams, and showed me how he stole train drivers' uniforms so he wouldn't have to pay for his ticket. He had a scam for everything, and I was well and truly inspired. I was in my mid-20s at the time, and trying my best to break into the photography world in London, which was no easy feat. I would email publishers, editors, and gallerists multiple times daily, trying to get any sort of photo jobs or drum up some interest in my work, but with no luck. In the movies and the documentaries that I watched, this shit seemed easier, but out of 400 to 500 emails I sent, I probably only got 1 or 2 replies back that weren't from a robot. Finally, one day, after years of radio silence, I was contacted by a young woman called Milla and her friend James, who asked me if I had any projects that I wanted to make. They offered me funding for a couple of books and a film, and helped me make my first book, Gra Hang, and my second book, Diary Part 1. The day they called me, I left the warehouse, and I haven't looked back since. I was in Berlin with the Russian. He is my oldest friend. We met in Dublin about 15 years ago, when he was 14 and I was 16. Back then he couldn't speak much English, but we both had a strong interest in doing graffiti and stealing things, and through that we became close. He was the boy who I painted with most as a teenager, exploring underpasses and tunnels and breaking into warehouses together, simply because there was nothing better to do. We spent hours figuring out the best markers to steal, what drill bit scratched glass the best, what ink recipes stained the hardest, and the stores in Dublin with the least security, so we could get a free lunch. A long time had passed since those days, and now the Russian and I dot around the globe separately, doing our own thing, and meeting up every few years in strange places around Europe, to paint and drink too much vodka until we argue about stupid stuff. We steal, we bicker, we paint, we fight, we plan crazy missions, We cycle around together and we break things. I have fond memories of sitting in Sofia with him, eating cheap, cured donkey meat while he sniffed a fat lump of cocaine on a rocking chair, swimming in giant lakes in Berlin after sharing a bottle of awful brandy, and painting countless things together in terrifying locations, where if you slip once, you're dead. I have a lot of respect for the Russian. We have much in common and share a similar love for weirdo counterculture and subculture. During our childhoods, we looked up to characters like Adam and Itzo, Revs, Mike Brody, Iraq Crew, WUFC, Tomcat, Kegger, Nug, and Nepal Crew in Paris. We liked oddball outsiders who created interesting things in unusual spaces. The outcasts, the freaks, the weirdos. They were always fascinating to us, and as a kid, I drew inspiration from people who lived on the margins and made things how they wanted to make them, in a very anti-societal, fuck the world, DIY way. Now I try to live like that too, doing things exactly how I want them done, and making my own rules while doing so. I try to burn bright, take risks, and take chances, but sometimes it all goes wrong. I'm burned out after 5 years of shooting silly commissioned work for stupid people, so I've stopped taking photographs professionally for a while. All I care about is making music, getting high with my friends, and making the most of my dwindling youth. So we're doing a lot of nothing, painting too much, cycling around, swimming, and enjoying having no responsibilities. I haven't taken photographs or done much that's creative for 6 months, but I feel myself being pulled back in sometimes. I want to document what's happening around me and have memories of the amazing people I'm meeting on my trips. I've realized how insane some of the things I witness are, and I feel an overwhelming urge to photograph them. The Russian had just been freight hopping from Switzerland to Milan, but I didn't join because I have beef with the graffiti writer he went with. It was the night of his return, and he was fucked up after drinking too much vodka on the plane. We met in the dark, and after throwing glass bottles at some angry Germans, we hopped on our bikes and took to the cobble streets to find somewhere to paint. He found a raggedy old wall and started doing a throw-up, but once he finished the outline of his last letter, a cop car, which I was too drunk to spot, happened to drive by. Before we had a chance to move, they were all over us, caught chrome-handed. The cop recognized the Russian's throw-up, even though he pronounced it incorrectly, and he knew a little too much about graffiti, even knowing the slang name of the can we were using. "Ah, the burner chrome," he said. "Wonderful choice." We were worried he was Vandal Squad, the special police force designated only to graffiti writers, and that we were in real trouble. We swayed side to side from the vodka, standing like loose flags on a misty, cold Berlin evening, unsure of what to do. I stared at the ground while the Russian smoked a cigarette. The air was sharp. Thankfully, the interrogation didn't last long, and a bit of slick talking spared us jail time. Half an hour later, we were sitting on a mangled old bench in a dark car park with some Eastern European bike criminals with scars down their faces. The Russians spoke to them in their native tongue and snorted their speed while they drank cheap beers together and bickered in a language I couldn't understand. They kept trying to pull the rings off my fingers while I insisted they weren't worth anything. Later, while cycling home, a robust Turkish man ran at me full speed like a hairy, bloodthirsty rhino as I rode the wrong way down a busy road, avoiding traffic. He had seen us from his balcony, painting his brand new truck. It was 6 a.m, and I'd had enough. It was time to sleep. A few months later, it was 5 a.m. I was with 3 people and we were sitting in an undisclosed location in East Berlin. We waited impatiently until we saw the final cleaner leave the train station, so that the 3 of us could sneak in and write our names on the big yellow beast sitting deep in the tunnel, the German U-Bahn. The last 2 weekends, we'd painted in exactly the same space, pepped up on cheap whiskey from the Spatkauf, machismo adrenaline, and the excitement of meeting up hungover the next day to go to the station, drink a coffee, and watch our colourful pieces roll by. I was with an odd 55-year-old British man who was staying on my friend's couch, paying for the privilege with stolen kettles and various appliances he was thieving. Alongside him was the Russian, who I was always happy to see. We had been cycling around the city and taking pictures during the day, and planning what spots we wanted to paint together. In the evening, the routine continues, and again we down non-expensive liquor like it's water, laze around, smoke some hash, and commit as many crimes as possible. The first summer we met in Berlin, we didn't spend a day sober in 2 months, and this summer wasn't much different. When you never stop drinking, you never get a hangover. So we pushed forward. Midway through reminiscing with the guys, I had to urgently run out of the station and up the stairs to the nearest park, clutching my stomach. The older man was close behind me, as he needed to do the same. What a strange feeling to be squatting in the fog and mist, meters away from another person doing the same. But we had both been struck by something called Yardarse. Yardarse, or Angstscheiße, as it is known in Germany, is the graffiti phenomena where fear mixes with adrenaline and you suddenly and desperately need to use the bathroom right before you paint a train. It's unfortunately never in a place with a toilet, and a porcelain pot is a distant dream when it hits. Usually, it's right before something very important is about to happen too, and it kind of fucks up the plans. Thankfully, most older train riders are seasoned veterans when it comes to knowing what supplies to bring on a mission. Under the moonlight, with the trees swaying above us, he passed me 4 sheets of toilet paper so I didn't have to use a handful of nettles. We wiped up and ran back into the station, and just as the cleaner waddled out to spend the rest of the day sleeping, we were sneaking quietly down the long tunnel, into the darkness. It was time. Our hats were pulled low and tight, and our masks pulled high to disguise ourselves from the cameras. We made sure our cans didn't shake as we carefully avoided stepping on rocks, holding our bags close to us and trying to move as smoothly as possible. I was slower than both of them, but I kept up, barely, and the Russian hissed at me to be quiet as we hopped from wooden beam to wooden beam along the tracks until we finally reached the train. Once there, we shone small bike lights into the cars to make sure no security was hiding on the floors. Ambushes were common, and none of us wanted to spend a night in the cells, so we checked every inch before we started doing anything illegal. And finally, it was clear. From that point, we had 25 to 30 minutes to do whatever we liked, so we used a myriad of colours to write our names as big as possible, ducking behind large concrete pillars and squashing together every time a train whizzed by, so that nobody could see us. We kept an eye on the station and the tracks, just in case Vandal Squad was sneaking up on us. Colourful fumes filled the air, and our lungs, as we applied the fill, the shadow, the background, the crispy black outline, and finally, the white highlights. Before you could blink, we had finished smoothly, packed up our supplies, and snuck back down the tunnel into the station. I threw my latex gloves in a trash can and wiped the sweat off my forehead. We cycled into the sunrise together, drinking stolen alcohol and chuckling about mistakes in our pieces. We had gotten away with it. Again. A lot of my actions in Berlin are self-destructive, as I mentioned previously. Almost every day for the first 2 months I was here, me and the Russian would wake up and drink vodka together. If we weren't being chased down the street by security guards, or various other assortments of angry men whose property we'd been damaging, we were sat in kneipas, talking about said property damage, or in Cottbusser Bridge, getting stoned with friends. Sometimes we swam together, sneaking through the holes in the Plötzensee fence, with a bag full of free ham and cheese from Lidl in our backpacks, vodka, lemon juice, a pack of rolling tobacco, and some sweets. We had a nice little crew at this point, and spent a lot of time with 3 Spanish girls, Celia, Paloma, and Nina, a funny Polish-French guy called Christoph, and a couple of older Germans called Chrissy and Nils. I had taken a strong shining to Celia. She was a crazy little anarchist, punk, graffiti writer from Spain. She was 19 when we met, and we quickly became the best of friends. I saw her as a little sister, and respected her immensely. I spent time on the bridge smoking hash with her, and watching movies in my basement flat in Schonleinstrasse with her and her crew. We watched Christian F. and Pichote, as four of us shared the same bed and ate popcorn, smoking cigarettes, telling jokes, and talking shit. This crew gave me life, and after struggling to fit in during my time in London, I finally felt part of a smelly, little punk, dysfunctional family. I went and shot Thelia in her squat one day, the famous and now cleared out Leipzig 34. It was messy and crowded, and had a large stairwell controlled by a pulley system that they raised in the evening in case of raids. It was like being on a pirate ship, and reminded me of something from Waterworld or Mad Max. I took pictures of her with her little rat, and afterwards she gave me a stick and poke tattoo on my armpit that said, "Fuck you scum," as Escroto de Rata, He Amores que Matan played in the background. She spoke to me about her childhood, her parents, and her stupid bummy boyfriend who she was now sick of, and we went raving together until the small hours of the morning. After all of my chaotic time in Berlin, I was happy to meet such a sweet, genuine person and have a little break from the mayhem. A few weeks later, I'm back in Thelia's squat, with her rat nibbling at my feet. There's rumours about the police shutting it down soon, which I tried to discuss with her, but she shushes me and tells me we can't talk about political stuff because the police have used surveillance on the squats before. I swear the next time I see her again, I'll take more pictures. But as per usual, life gets in the way, and I forget. It was 4 p.m. in Paris. I was wrapping up a Balenciaga shoot for this magazine who I work with sometimes. I usually hate shooting fashion stuff, but they let me shoot whatever I want, however I want, and they pay for film and developing, so it's fine. There's a long, slim model sleeping on the couch, while the crew sits on the floor and eats beef bourguignon from the local chain restaurant Miznon. He suddenly wakes up confused, takes his pants off, and comes and sits next to me, rubbing my leg and looking at me intensely, while I'm awkwardly trying to spoon my lunch into my mouth. Before I knew it, he was asleep again, sat on the floor with his legs crossed like a small child, and his head resting on my shoulder. Lunch finished, and it was his time to wake up and model, so the stylist tried to wake him up, shaking his shoulder, and whispering to him in French. But he was unresponsive. A second later he would wake up, crying and screaming and drooling all over himself, and then totally passing out again. It turns out that he'd taken too much GHB in the taxi on the way to the shoot, and he was overdosing right there next to us. 6 paramedics came to the small apartment, and he was brought down the spiral staircase out to an ambulance in a stretcher, while everyone looked on in horror. His agency emailed me the next day with his invoice, apologising for him having to leave early, telling me that he had food poisoning. Usually I love Paris, and I try my best to go as much as possible. Most people in the city are too cool to hang out with me, especially the graffiti writers, and I don't have many friends here, apart from Thibaut from Classic Paris and a boy called Emile from the Irish countryside. But I still have fun on my own, and I take great pleasure sitting on the Pont Neuf, eating truffle sausages, and getting drunk in dingy little bars in Pigalle. I walked the whole circumference of Bois de Boislon, and took pictures of the wooden huts that the sex workers built from sticks to hide themselves from the cops. In the woods, trans women stood powerfully, while scantily clad in full lingerie, smoking nonchalantly as policemen trotted past them on white horses. I caught eyes with one, wearing all black with a sharp fringe and fishnets pulled high. She moved her panties to the side and helicoptered her erect cock at me while staring deep into my eyes. I froze in the woods like a deer, transfixed by the rotating knob like I was being hypnotized by a swinging pendulum. I roamed the streets alone, painting graffiti and trying to find fun things to take pictures of. And before I knew it, a 3-day trip turned into 3 months, and I had to pock back to London to finally clear out my apartment and deal with some annoying trouble with the police. I took way too many magic mushrooms in London and had a total mental breakdown. I was walking down Kingston High Street talking to myself, drinking from a bottle of Jameson's whiskey. Everything had gotten too much for me, and the voices in my head had gotten louder and louder until I couldn't take it anymore. Suicide was not an if anymore, but a when. And my days were spent having fantasies about taking my life, how I'd do it, and wondering what my friends and family's reactions would be. I decided to go back to Dublin to see my mother. Ireland was in full lockdown and the borders were closed. The only way to get there was to fly into Belfast and travel over the border. I caught coronavirus from a dodgy cabbie while doing so, and I gave it to my mum. The 2 weeks I spent caged up in my old house were pure torment and misery. There's something strange about being in your childhood bed. The place where you got your first pube. The place where you cried your eyes out over a teenage heartbreak. The place where I dreamed about my future. The place where I snuck girls in at 3 a.m. and prayed that my mother wouldn't hear us. I used to bag up pills to sell in this bed. I used to do graffiti sketches before painting the local train tracks in this bed. I used to write a teenage diary in this bed. I used to smoke hash out of the window at 3 a.m. And now I'm 30 in this bed again, with nothing and nobody, having nightmares about my past life in London, and wishing I could be anywhere else. It's the 2nd of February 2021. I woke up today and couldn't walk. I'm in Mexico. I have no clue what's going on with me, but I'm scared and alone and I feel like death. I can't lie down or stand up because the pain is so bad, and I feel like my stomach is going to explode into a million gooey pieces, like a watermelon hit with a shotgun. I'm full to the brim with self-pity, and I wonder with the year I've had, why I deserve to feel this way. Surely God should have some grace on me, some sympathy. I slowly wiggle out of bed and crawl, clutching onto the walls to get myself out of the front door of my apartment, where I sit on the sandy floor, waiting for a taxi to roll by. "Hospital! Hospital!" I shout to the first guy who pulled up. He looked at me confused, then picked me up like a suitcase and bundled me in the back of his dusty old cab. He ripped me off, but I didn't care. I just wanted to be safe. And now I'm sat in the hospital with 2 neon green drips in my arms. I spent 3 nights there in confusion. The ultrasound results came back, and it turns out that I have tumours on my liver and colitis from salmonella poisoning. I'm crying in a hospital bed with needles hanging out of my arm, wondering again what I did to deserve all of this, and who I wronged in a past life. 1 year ago I had a fiancé, an apartment, and a city full of friends. Now I have nothing, not even my health. I wanted to go home so bad, but didn't even have a home to go to anymore. I'd given it all away as part of my quest for independence. It seems like this life of unanchored freedom has its drawbacks too, the main ones being stability, routine, and having good people around me. Oh damn, the painkiller is kicking in. It's time to sleep. I said goodbye to a lot of things today. It's early December 2020, and a mound of melted wax lays before me. At one point, a beautiful, delicately carved candle, bearing the likeness of me and my ex-fiancé, but now, a puddle of goop. I sit alone, high and naked, in the house which we used to share together. I'm surrounded by the remnants of our memories. Polaroids of her and love letters litter the floor, and every little thing in the house seems to hold some emotions and a story. It's hard to write about love and love lost without sounding cliche, but it's challenging to be in a place that was once special, which is now an empty shell, and to reflect on a tender relationship which is now reduced to nothing more than a mound of melted wax. I finished off my supply of shrooms and cried for 4 hours, watching the candles twist, dance and burn, while I listened to Philip Glass and ate a Texas barbecue pie from Domino's Pizza. If I could look at myself from another perspective, I would probably laugh. But at that moment, I said goodbye to a relationship with a person who was once very dear to me, and said goodbye to my relationship with London. As I watched our faces melt and the smoke rise from the candles. A weight started to lift off my shoulders. I pulled and puffed on a Marlboro Gold while I watched the lights twinkle and the cars whiz down Kingdon Road. I was way too high to go outside. I'd spent 7 years in this place. I called East London my home for a long time, but now it was time to find somewhere new, to make a new home, new memories, and maybe even someday a new love. I'm right by the monument in Bastille, surrounded by thousands of people. Things explode around me left and right, and half of the street is on fire. The sun is setting, and it looks and sounds like a war zone. There's a black Mercedes on fire, and French hipster kids are taking pictures of it with their point-and-shoot cameras. I enter the hoardings below the monument and do my tag, with a huge ACAB next to it. There's faces everywhere. Old people, teenagers, black bloc, medics. Moments before I was retching and had to kneel on the ground to spit and dribble whatever remnants of the tear gas was still in my mouth onto the dirty pavement below. A medic ran over to help me and squeezed the clear liquid in my eyes. It was the second time I got a cloud of gas to the face in an hour, and the riot police were firing it everywhere, willy-nilly. Nobody was safe. I was at the protest to take photos and protest the draconian new laws that France was aiming to bring into effect. The law basically makes it illegal to take photographs and videos of the police, punishable by a hefty fine. I have a lot of respect for the French protesters. They're organised, passionate, they stand together against the injustices the government perpetuates against them, and they love to smash stuff. I woke up groggy the next day. My clothes are covered in dust and mud, and my hands are stained with ink. I wonder if any of my pictures came out. It's midwinter in the middle of a coronavirus lockdown, but the city is still busy and has that chaotic energy which I love about Paris. You need to fill out a long form if you want to leave the house for 45 minutes, which makes things difficult. But I wrote some bullshit on my form and left my shabby little hotel with it in my pocket. I wanted to paint something dangerous, so I asked around for contacts or someone who could help me. But in typical French fashion, all the graffiti writers are too cool to text me back. Randomly, I get talking to an old friend on Instagram, a young Albanian woman from Belgium, and she kindly hand draws me a map of where to go if I want to paint something. On the map, I'm represented by a little smiley stick figure riding the train, and it has full instructions of what to do, so I try my best to memorize it before leaving my place, as taking it with me would be quite stupid. I take the train to one of the last stations, and approach the tunnel in the same clothes I've been wearing for the last 6 days. I came here for a photo job and decided to stay a few weeks longer, so I've barely anything with me, and there's not much else to do here, apart from eating cheese in bed and walking around, doing or thinking about doing graffiti, and taking some photographs too, well, at least trying to. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, the train. I slipped past the barrier and entered the tunnel quickly, as the train was leaving, which blocked me from the CCTV and setting off the motion sensors. I sprinted carefully towards the Parisian metros at the back of the tunnel. One wrong move and I'd be spotted by security, or electrocuted by the live tracks, which would instantly mean death, arrest, a massive fine, or jail. The negative possibilities were endless. I was on Ligne 6, and the trains were big and beautiful. I'm not a train watcher or a train model enthusiast, but I couldn't help being struck by how nice they looked. Shiny and clean, white and mint green, like a big piece of toothpaste. I took out a can of water-based spray paint. We use water-based so the guards can't smell the fumes. I put an Astro cap on the can so I could fill the most amount of space as quickly as possible. I looked at the sketch I wanted to paint on my phone for reference, and as I stood in the tunnel doing my thing, I felt truly at peace, like nobody could upset me, disturb or bother me. While painting, I felt total stillness. I had no thoughts, no worries, no nostalgia, no sad memories, and no hopes for the future. The only thing I could think of was how to finish off what I was doing as creatively and as beautifully as possible, and to evade detection and death to the best of my ability. It is funny that one of the scariest, most illegal, most life-threatening situations I could place myself into could also be the most serene. I finish up, turn my clothes inside out, took my hat off, and entered back into the real world, blending in with everyone else as they rushed to and from work. I went to a sex cinema today, or a sex kino as they're called in Berlin. Expecting some sort of wild, passionate orgy, I paid my €12 at the counter of a large sex shop in Kurfürstenstrasse called LSD, aka Love, Sex, Dreams. The cinema had 3 screens, one for gay films, one for trans films, and one for straight films. It was a small, grimy place. The type of cheap, unnecessary club that nobody wants to spend time in anymore. A relic of the past, from a more complicated, way hornier era, when the internet and Grindr didn't exist. In my head, sex cinemas were large, decorative places that actually looked like cinemas, or theatres. But this place definitely didn't have any vintage charm, and it was overall about as depressing as it gets. I started in the trans screen, as it was right next to the front door. The room was full of middle-aged men jerking off, which took me by surprise. Surely, I thought, there should be some women and young people just around the corner. The straight screen was a little bigger, with red chairs loosely arranged in an arch, to watch a large screen that was pumping out vintage pornos. In this room, there was one old man watching, and smoking a cigarette. He was fully dressed, and looked incredibly bored, slumped on a chair with his bag of groceries next to him. That's not really my idea of fun, so I went to check out the gay room, knowing that gay men like to have a good time, and I was probably about to witness a sexual situation more intense than an erotic fresco from Pompeii. But alas, there stood 3 men, wanking themselves into an early grave, all too awkward to look at each other in the eyes. It looked like some sort of odd performance art piece, and was one of the least sexually stimulating sights I've ever witnessed. I left, cycled home, and ate a chicken doner in my bed. My journey into the German sex underworld was not off to a good start. I seem to only wake up at night now. Most of the week I'm sleeping until 3 p.m. and only waking up to plan whatever painting is happening that evening. The local writers here don't like or respect my graffiti. They think it's too toy, too childlike, too simple, too stupid, which makes me want to do it even more, and do it even worse, and do it even messier just to piss them off. Taking part in this subculture is not a public service, and anyone doing this to make friends or win some sort of popularity contest is embarrassing to me. I respect graffiti writers and bombers who do shit in their own way. People like Clint, Wombat, Revs, Blade, Cherokee, Renks. They're my inspirations. I like freaks, weirdos, and outcasts, not people trying to be part of some scene or social club. Go collect Pokemon cards or play Dungeons and Dragons if that's what you want. So many graffiti writers I look up to have stopped painting now, or moved on to other things. Graffiti is a dirty word within most art and creative circles. Some people like Martin Wong, Seo, Rammelsy, and Ida Ekblad have broken the mold, incorporating ideas that stem from graffiti or using elements of graffiti to make legitimate contemporary art that sells for a lot of money. But most people that try to mix the two mediums fail miserably, so just opt to leave graffiti behind them entirely. People like Jorge, Todd James Reese, KR, and other artists who inspired me as a kid aren't really graffiti writers anymore. They don't have time for it, or simply lost interest, and that's totally fine, but I love the older guys who keep it alive. I don't know, maybe stopping is for the best, because what good can a life of crime really bring you? Most people start painting as an act of defiance, as lost teenagers. They're people who just want to break things. To most real writers, this thing we devote a large chunk of our life and freedom to is an act of pure rebellion. By stopping graffiti to focus on art and pandering to the rich gallerists who push you this way, are we not just becoming boring, stuffy farts, like the people we were initially rebelling against? A slow morph into our parents, who we never wanted to be anything like? I've met 50-year-old graffiti writers who are depressing, and they make me say, damn, I don't want to be like that. But aren't all 50-year-old men depressing? What do normal 50-year-old people do? Have boring sex with their wives and listen to the radio? Maybe Google whatever kitchen appliance they plan to buy with their next paycheck? Isn't there something inspiring about someone who's 50 and wants to spend their free time in a dirty tunnel at 5 a.m? At least doing something they enjoy? Personally, I think so. Painting trains on ketamine is not fun. The two guys I'm with are doing a great job of prancing from track to track like dainty mice, while I stumble across the rocks like an elephant. We sprint through the tunnels as I try to keep up, using my bike light to illuminate the tracks as the Russian is above us on the small wooden platform, checking for hiding security guards inside the carriages. Last week he got to a train and found a security guard asleep inside it, but of course he got away. Better luck next time, buddy. We continue our cat and mouse chase, dotting from yard to yard across the city's metropolis of layups. When the other train comes, we quickly hide underneath the train we're painting, pushing our limbs deep within our clothes so that the oncoming train doesn't see our flesh and alert the authorities. Our bodies squished tightly to the metal, knowing if the train started that we'd all die. I'm lost in Berlin again. Winter's kicking in and the city feels emptier and colder. I'm on my bike trying to follow the large tower on Alexanderplatz to get my bearings. I've been here for 2 months now, but still feel like a stranger in this city. But every city I've lived in, I felt this way. Ireland is where I've spent most of my life, and I never truly felt like I belonged there either. I was always the odd one out, and I think I'll always feel that way, no matter where I am. Tonight we go to paint the scuba spot. It's winter time and it's freezing, so we wrap up in dark clothes and get on our bikes to make our way there. The scuba spot, nicknamed by us, is a large bridge with an S-band sitting on top of it. It's about 3 stories high. If the police or security are coming from both ends of the tracks to ambush you, you've no choice but to jump into the water below or break a leg trying to reach a rooftop. Therefore, it's a scuba spot, as we joke about needing scuba gear to paint it. We arrive at around 1:30 in the morning, timing everything exactly so that we know when the last service is. Outside the station, we smoke rollies and drink vodka with Club Mate, as we try and drum up some courage and motivation to paint. We enter the empty station and slink past the cleaners. We duck into the blind spots, cross the tracks, and head onto the bridge. The water is deep black and glistening below us. It doesn't look tempting to jump into. We move closer and closer down the tracks. If a train comes, we have to duck into an alcove and hang from the bridge so the driver can't see us. Our legs dangle from 3 stories up, and I hope my hands don't slip. We run down the tracks for 3 to 4 minutes and get to where they park the train. But looking at each other in shock, we realise that there isn't one there. We've come back at the wrong time and missed it, so we silently and angrily run back to the station and back down the stairs. We sit on the steps opposite the bridge for an hour, kicking rocks and complaining about not being able to paint. We all had fresh colours and funky ideas, and it's a real shame not being able to use them. When we finally get so bored that we're ready to leave, we cycle past a spot on the bridge where we were meant to paint, to see if we can see anything, and to our surprise, there's a train sitting there. It must have arrived just shortly after we left, and what's even more surprising is that there's 4 shadows up there, and they're moving their hands up and down like they're painting. We can just barely make out 4 letters. H-E-L-L. Fuck's sake, we said. The Germans have beaten us to it. We watch them paint for a few minutes and leave as we see them getting out of there. As we were cycling further along the bridge to go home, we see 3 flustered policemen walking on the tracks above us. They all see us and stop, and we lock eyes. At that moment, we realised that we fit the exact description of the men they were currently looking for, and we were all holding bags of paint. As we quickly cycled away, a police car slowly started to follow us. We turned onto the Russian street, and the police car didn't turn with us, but a few moments later they came down his street, speeding straight towards us. He turned his key, and we fell on his front door like dominoes. "Jesus Christ," said the Russian. "We almost got arrested for their panels." It had been another long night. August 29th, 2020, Berlin. It's 10:30 p.m. in Cottbusser Tor, and I'm sitting at Café Coddy, surrounded by the usual mix of crackheads, Turks, Africans, Germans, hipsters, ravers, squatters, punks, and bemused tourists. A young man hastily marches our way, speeding along an erect walkway that circles around the tower blocks, which loom above us. He has a long gash on his neck, deep in dripping blood. He and his friend are quickly moving towards a younger guy, and everyone's carrying blades, keen for payback and retribution. They stopped directly in front of us and started to fight, brutally. They're punching and kicking and hitting each other in the head with chairs, only inches away. They had their backs to us and were manically slashing each other while we tried to avoid getting hit by the crossfire of fists and knives. One man was so close that I was sure I'd get stabbed too, but we all survived, albeit a little splattered with the blood of both men. Some of it ending up on me, and some of it ending up on Thalia, the little punk. The violence reminded me of a past life, witnessing hardcore chaos almost daily in Dublin. I saw so many people in pools of blood when I was growing up that it really started to become normal after a while. And back then, my nose was broken so many times that I still can't breathe properly. I'm in a bar after the mayhem with a couple of graffiti writers and some funny Spanish squatters. We had some energy after the chaos, so me and one of the guys went bombing around Croitacone, leaving the others to do some cheap speed and go to a little smelly gay bar up the street. Small dogs yapped and old men snarled at us as we wrote some below average graffiti on a variety of surfaces, crisscrossing from street to street on our bicycles, until we got too tired and all of our paint was gone. Monday, 21st of February, 2022. I'm in Hackney Central in London, in a shitty hotel with no windows. I got flown here to shoot some stuff, but the shoot didn't turn out so good. I was controlling a 60-person set and both of my cameras broke during it. It all seemed fine at the time, but when I got my scans back they were terrible, and mostly black. My agent berated me for a few hours while I sat eating Chinese hot pot, and I quickly realised that I would never work for them again. They were probably going to drop me too, which is a shame because I really loved them. I hate working in fashion, more than anything. I can't explain why, but I feel like such a sellout when I do work for someone or shoot something that I don't care about. I'm asking myself if I should just smash up all my cameras and be done with photography. Life is way more simple and way less stressful when I was a kid doing illegal stuff for money, and I hate being told what to do. Right now, the urge to run away to Mexico and sit in a hut for 3 months is stronger than ever, and I think back to my days in the warehouse and how stress-free it was, despite the manual labour and not always being able to afford lunch. I used to be friends with a witch, but we fell out. Her neighbour in London pissed her off, so she dug up some dirt from her ex's grave and used it for a spell that was meant to fuck the neighbour up, but I'm not sure if it did, and we never spoke about it again. She was a dominatrix too, and people would pay for her to sit on their faces and strangle them until they turned blue. My mother was a witch also. She saw my friend dying before it happened, and she ran into the bathroom thinking I was going to be the one who passed, but it was my friend who went instead, when his car flipped on a dirt road in the Irish countryside. He was what they called a boy racer, with shiny Lacoste tracksuits and a perfectly gelled fringe. I sat in his back garden and smoked some hash with his friends at his memorial. They were older than me and a little scary. We passed a spliff from side to side and nobody spoke. When a small-time Irish gangster called Gary and his friends were trying to kill me a few years later, the scary boys from the memorial tried to help me, but got overexcited and threatened to burn down this guy's house with his baby inside. I started to get a lot of phone calls from prison, and this lasted for quite a while. There was tense moments between me and the gang for a few months, and I was living in fear, wondering when they'd finally find me. My friend Shane got hit in the head with a crowbar when 2 cars showed up to a party looking for me. I had just slipped out of the back door 2 minutes before. I'd heard that a few of them had guns, so I ran home and hid behind the bushes every time a car went past. We eventually smoothed it out, and a few weeks later they blew someone's stomach off with a sawn-off shotgun. It could have been me. I'd forgotten all of this, and it became just another story from my childhood, when 4 or 5 years later a man ended up in my house. He was a door-to-door salesman, selling cable television. My mum said she'd had a funny feeling about him, that she could sense something was off. She asked his name and it turned out it was the same gangster Gary, who'd been passionately looking for me for a long time. He was now reformed and working a 9 to 5, in my house, trying to sell my mother a cable TV package. It's my first day in Los Angeles, and I'm walking around looking at all the subcultures which I've obsessed about since being a kid. To my left, there's a haggard old surfer who looks like a turkey that's been left in the oven too long. The cop behind me, who's supporting a thick mustache, is laughing to his partner, telling him he arrested the turkey a week before for hate crimes, spraying a swastika in Universal Studios. Across the street, there's a Hasidic Jew bobbing along, and I remember it's Passover and think of my granny and how much I'd love to be eating smoked salmon with her in London right now. Across the street, a group of young skateboarders share a joint. It's 30 degrees outside, but they're still wearing gigantic baggy hoodies and beanies. Rolling down Fairfax on electric bikes are 3 white men with huge chains and diamond grills on, Bluetooth speakers clipped to their BB Simon belts, playing Kodak Black. My friend picks me up in his old Lexus and drives me down the street to grab some food. He hates Hollywood, but I just got here, so he came to see me. We suddenly crashed into the side of an old Honda Civic, and the guy who's driving isn't happy. He calls his cousin, a janitor from Fairfax High School, who said he's going to beat our ass when he gets there. We sit in the car, and his cousin comes running, shirtless and flexing on us, covered in Gangster Disciple tattoos, and shouting that he was going to fill us with bullets, while simultaneously trying to smash our windows, and calling us pussy-ass bitches. We tried to drive off, but he barricaded us, and threatened to kill us if we moved an inch. A police helicopter came, along with multiple squad cars who surrounded us and screeched to a halt as women in yoga pants filmed the whole situation on their phones. For fuck's sake, I thought, my first hour in America, and I'm going to go to jail or get shot just for sitting in the front of my friend's car trying to get a sandwich. We were all handcuffed and made to stand under the hot LA sun. The cops asked me if I was stoned or currently on parole, while the Gangster Disciple showed them his music on SoundCloud. Eventually they uncuffed us all and let us go. The cops and the gangster vanished into a pile of smoke, and we were left scratching our heads with a totaled Lexus. Welcome to America. A few months later. Last year I had $350,000 in my bank account. Today I had $3. I had $5 earlier today, but I needed to spend $2 on the bus to go to my friend Callie's house. Me and him were going to a Dean Blunt show together with Ukrainian Danny. He slipped me $100 bill in his kitchen and said, "Don't go hungry in LA, man." I felt embarrassed, but I was thankful. I'd been sat in my bedsit eating tinned tuna and mayonnaise for 3 days and was feeling miserable, but still, I hate taking money from people. It reminds me of being a broke teenager always mooching from my friends. I was that smelly poor kid who never had money for the bus and had to walk everywhere. That was until I discovered stealing. But unfortunately that's not an option for me in the USA, as these guys are strict and I don't want to go to jail and be deported for trying to get a free lunch. It had been 4 years of travelling wherever the wind took me. I hadn't had the same bed for longer than 3 months within a 48-month period, and it's been intense, tiring, sad, stressful, but ultimately beautiful. I risked a lot over that time, including my life, my health, my freedom, and my sanity. "2022, and it's summer in Berlin. I'm sat on a rickety speddy bench with my mum and my new girlfriend Delfina, a tiny Argentinian cutie I met in Paris a few weeks before. In typical fashion, we're drinking club mates with cheap vodka, right opposite Bodenstrasse station. I haven't been here since I lived here, spending almost every day with the Russian a couple of years ago, when I first started writing my little stories down on a small notepad and taking photographs of my friends. We would spend hours in this station, waiting for the trains we painted to roll by so that we could take pictures. Freezing cold, warming ourselves up with hot chocolate spiked with cheap German brandy called Chantre. I asked my mum to tell Delfina one of her stories, and she begins with the one about the guy in the Middle East who almost blew her head off with a Kalashnikov. I get her to tell the one about her friend who got killed in Jordan, and the aftermath which ended up in an assassination that led to my mum being warned she'd be murdered too. She got her very own fatwa. She had some crazy stories. It had been years since I'd been in Berlin, and it had changed quite a bit. A lot of my friends were struggling with substance abuse issues post-COVID, and the sparkle had worn off a little. Stelia, the baby punk I had shot before, was alive, well and healthy, and we climbed under a bridge together to shoot the shit and paint some graffiti. She had a new boyfriend, and they were about to drive to Portugal together. He had a fake latex penis, filled with clean piss, in case the cops pulled him over, and I laughed at how realistic it was as we ate grapes on his rooftop. I spent a lot of time in Delfina's house with her best friend Fran, who was also from Argentina. Fran was questioning transitioning and was dealing with some real bullshit from the German locals due to their feminine nature, wild outfits, and long, glowing black hair. I photographed Fran and Deli and various friends in their house, and we stayed up for hours watching movies on the projector. I showed them Birth by Jonathan Glazer, and they showed me the Japanese anime Mind Game. Berlin made me sad sometimes, and at other times I loved being here. The freedom and the cost of living was liberating, but that also attracted a bunch of lost kids escaping various things and turning to drugs. In 4 days' time, I'd go to Indonesia to make music, and after that to Tokyo to spend some time with the Yakuza, and hopefully I would make a new book or two along the way. Life felt pretty good. I'd stopped taking mushrooms, and for once I wasn't spiraling into a deep depression every other day. Delfina definitely was helping. It's now my last day in Berlin. I wasn't going to see Delfina for 4 to 5 months, so I wanted to do something romantic. Me, the Russian, and our German friend dressed up as train drivers and train cleaners in stolen uniforms and went deep into Neukölln together. There, with his special key, we opened a large hatch on the street and used the ladder below to climb 3 stories down into the tunnels, where a yellow train lay dormant. They'd left the doors open so that we couldn't paint, but our German friend quickly fixed that with a bit of brute force, and I started my piece. I wrote my tag in 10 colours on the side of the train, with a little love letter for Delfina above, decorated with some multicoloured stars, hearts, and sparkles. It was beautiful, and I knew she'd love it. I woke her up at 9 AM telling her I had something to show her, and we walked to the nearest train station to see what I'd done. I didn't tell her what it was because I thought it would be more romantic to surprise her. We sat on a bench, and a homeless man sat right next to us, sniffing coke with a rolled up €50 note. The station smelt like BO, piss, and stale cigarettes, and after 2 hours of waiting the train never arrived. Romance. I suppose things don't always work out like you want them to. October 25th, 2022, 9:30 PM. I'm sitting in a park in Hadagaya, Tokyo, rocking on a children's swing and writing into my iPhone notes. American football's record is playing on my headphones. I guess this is the last story I'm writing in this book, because the project is finished now, and I have to submit everything to Thibaut, the Parisian publisher who said he'd put it all out for me. I've been in Tokyo for 3 weeks, drinking highballs and taking pictures on the street. I came here to release this book, a book on the male host industry, a book on the California porn industry, and a book on the Yakuza. I hope nothing serious happens to me while I'm here. A lot of people who are involved with the Yakuza go missing, but this is a life I chose, so I just have to commit and go for it. Tokyo is my favourite place in the world, and I spend my time here in snack bars drinking with old grannies, eating fish ramen in tiny wooden shops you can only fit 5 people in, and drinking whiskey in my favourite small bars. Looking back at the paragraphs in this book makes me feel funny. Sometimes I cringe, and sometimes I wonder how I ended up in the situations I was in. I wish I wrote more down along the way, and I definitely wish I shot more, but I get caught up in the moment too much and forget to bring my camera or document my experience. I can't believe that I've been travelling out of a single suitcase for 4 years, and I can't believe I'm still here. I've never written anything down properly before this book, and clearly I'm not great at it, but all I can do is be honest and try my best, which is what I try to do with all of the art that I've clumsily made over the last 10 years. When I first started writing things down in this book, all I wanted was to die, and my work and life was purely self-destructive. But now I feel more alive than ever. I suppose everything worked out in the end, and I'm happy that I'm still here. To me, this ending is happy. It is a happy ending. This book is dedicated to all of the friends I've lost along the way, and to those who didn't get a happy ending. Thank you to everyone for listening.